The chase. My name is Gianna Vigorito, and the symbol that I chose for my chase was the serpent. So, why did I choose to chase the serpent? Well, I have always been intrigued by snakes. This obsession started as long ago as I can remember. Growing up, my father would have my little brother and I flip a coin to see what movie we wanted to watch that night. My brother always wanted Star Wars, and I always wanted Harry Potter and sometimes Indiana Jones. I remember being obsessed over the themes of snakes within the series. I loved the idea of parcel tongues, and I loved every scene with Nagini, who was Voldemort's pet snake. And during my freshman year of high school, I learned how Craigslist worked and met with some sketchy snake breeders. I did not understand the threat at that time, but luckily all the breeders ended up being very kind and nothing bad had happened. This led to the adoption of all three of my pet snakes over the years. The orange one you could see is that's Tybalt. I named her after the character in Romeo and Juliet. And then the python, that's Karma. And the bigger brown snake, his name's Leviathan, but I call him Levi for short. So let's move on to the chase itself. My chase was one that I felt like I had been pursuing far before this class. I have researched the serpent for years, and I feel like I could tell you all about them. This project opened up a new door for me, though, to a whole new level of understanding the serpent. This symbol is very popular universally, so I did not have too much trouble finding the information that I needed. I researched online in some books, watched some videos, and even asked those around me to explain their own view of what a serpent meant to them. The beginning. Now you may wonder, what is the difference between a snake and a serpent? They are initially one and the same, although a snake is usually referred to as a serpent due to the fact that the verb to serpent means to wind or to meander. When you inquire how most people feel about the serpent, the reaction you receive is predictable. They often say that the slithery creature symbolizes the devil, evil, death, destruction, and everything else that would be a negative connotation. Now, where does this stem from? Despite the fact that snakes are the most second-feared animal in the world, right behind the spider, according to Animal Planet, everyone knows the story of Adam and Eve. According to the story, Adam and Eve were persuaded by a serpent to eat from the tree of knowledge. It is inferred that the serpent is supposed to represent Satan, who usually speaks through different vessels throughout the Bible. When Eve argues the serpent that she is directed to never eat the forbidden fruit, the serpent replies, God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. Genesis 3:4. When one thinks in the terms of the serpent being associated with Satan, it is no wonder why the majority of society has such an evil stigma associated with it. So, what does the serpent actually represent? In a majority of cultures, serpents represent healing, growth, power, and rejuvenation. Even in the rest of the Bible, serpents are depicted as positive when they are not being associated with Satan. A quote from Matthew 10:16 states, Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. This quote depicts serpents as a representation of wisdom, intelligence, and immunity. This is far off from a representation of evil that is more commonly known. Serpents, though, are not limited to just the Bible. They are widespread throughout several myths, cultures, ceremonies, literature, and modern-day representations. There are several popular symbols that represent the power of serpents, one of the most popular being Ouroboros. Ouroboros is depicted as a serpent eating its own tail. It symbolizes eternity and endless return. Now we'll move on to serpent and symbolism in Greek mythology. Contrary to the Bible, the ancient Greeks viewed serpents as a symbol of luck or protection against evil. Asclepius, the god of medicine and doctors, also gives the serpent a fair reputation. He was raised by the centaur Chiron, who taught him the art of medicine. In addition to this, it is said that a snake, quote-unquote, licked his ears in return for kindness, end quote, and this gave him secret medicinal knowledge. Asclepius grew so skilled that he was even able to bring the dead back to life. Zeus was threatened by this, so he destroyed him with a thunderbolt. After his death, he was placed in Ophiuchus, which is the constellation known as the Serpent Holder. Asclepius is always portrayed as having a serpent-wrapped staff always in his grasp. This myth allowed for the serpent to represent medicine and medicinal qualities. This symbolism is still used today in big medicine brands such as Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is a health insurance company. As you can see, a serpent-wrapped staff is very clear on their logo. In addition to Asclepius, Medusa is the most well-known serpent-related character in Greek mythology. She was cursed by Athena for sleeping with Poseidon. Some accounts were consensual and some were not. And Medusa, who was once beautiful, was turned into a hideous woman with snakes for hair, who turned anyone who looked at her eyes into stone. While this is common sense about Medusa, many do not actually know that her and her serpents are a representation of fertility. This is also because Medusa is a goddess of menstrual and female power. Snakes are traditionally a symbol for menstruation. A German folktale offers the belief that if a menstruating woman buries her hair in the earth, it'll become a snake. And I got this story from these pages in this book that I have that give more insight on who Medusa is as a deity, so I just included these in here if you want to pause the video and read more in depth. But moving on to serpents in Egyptian culture and mythology. The uraeus is one of the most prominent symbols in Egyptian culture. The uraeus is a representation of a sacred serpent as an emblem of supreme power. It is usually worn on the head of Egyptian deities. And I inserted a picture of that here so you could see what they look like on the representations of royalty. And Wadjet was known as an ancient Egyptian goddess of protecting all of Egypt. She also protected kings and women going through childbirth. She is closely associated with the Eye of Ra, who is a powerful deity, and her symbol is a lot like the Eye of Horus, but is instead closely associated with the sun god Ra. Wadjet is often depicted as a snake-headed woman, usually a cobra, or as the uraeus itself. This image of her became the one that was used on the royal crowns of powerful Egyptians and deities. And she was also included in the book of deities that I have, so I included that here as well. Moving on to the serpent in Native culture. Snakes or serpents are one of the most prominent symbols in Native American culture. In the tribes of Ojibwa and Pueblo, snakes were associated with fertility and new life due to their ability to shed their skin whole. Several tribes had ceremonies called the Ritual of the Snake, which consisted of releasing snakes into the wild during times of the year. Other tribes, such as the Hopi, view the serpent as a connection to the underworld. Similarly, the Cherokee also view the serpent as being very powerful and associate them in connection to the gods of thunder. The native tribes of Ohio also built the Serpent Mound, which is thought to have been used to mark time or seasons, like the summer solstice. Some tribes, though, were wary due to having venomous snakes in their area of their tribal lands. This caused a fear of these snakes, and the Navajo treated these animals with caution. They believed that even watching serpents for too long could bring bad luck. In 2015, the Navajo Nation Zoo in Window Rock even removed snakes from their live exhibits because people tended to avoid that part of the zoo. Moving on to serpents in Eastern cultures. As I mentioned before, the serpent is a dominating symbol throughout history. All cultures have had their own interpretation of the serpent, but a majority of them relate to new growth and fertility. In India, snakes are a symbol of the soul. They are worshipped through the holy month of Shravan, which takes place from July 23rd to August 22nd this year. This month is noted as the best time to pray to Lord Shiva. During this time, snakes and cobras are fed milk, and killing snakes during this time is prohibited. In China, serpents are still a representation of intuition. They are the sixth symbol in the 12-year cycle of the Chinese zodiac. The Chinese mother goddess Nuwa, who is said to have created humanity, has the body of a snake and the head of a human. Now we will talk about serpents in dreams. So as far as we know with current science, dreams are projected images that represent the feelings of our subconscious. Serpents in a dream are thought to offer medicinal communication, offering wisdom to the one they show themselves to. Serpents are represented as psychic creatures due to them being the only one of the non-mammalian vertebrates that have a pineal gland or a third eye. This allows many cultures to hold the assumption that serpents can travel the astral plane. In a dream state, snakes often symbolize power, sexuality, healing, growth, wisdom, or even a representation of what one fears. If snakes are a common theme in your dream, begin to pay attention to why and what it might be trying to tell you. And here I included some pictures of representations of like snakes in the dreamscape that I thought were pretty cool. And as we near the end of the presentation, we will move on to other representations of the serpent. There are several stories and theories as to why serpents are such a dominating symbol throughout history. The theories consist of multiple accounts of ancient civilizations communicating with snake-like or reptilian-like creatures. If this is true, it makes sense why serpents are talked about and depicted of since the beginning of time as such powerful symbols. In the book known as Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge by Jeremy Narby, Narby believes that psychedelics had a play in the representation of the serpent. He thinks that psychedelics allowed native people to have direct access to DNA and that it is represented as two intertwined serpents. This idea is both entertaining and interesting due to the idea that psychedelic visuals could definitely be to blame for a lot of the ideas of communicating with serpents. And then here I included another artwork that relates to the themes in Cosmic Serpent and a lot of Narby's ideas within the book. And to conclude, as you can see, the symbol of the serpent is not only important to me, but important to every culture around the world. While they all have different representations in these cultures, the overall theme is the same. Serpents are independent and represent strength, growth, and fertility. I hope you learned something interesting about my symbol, and thank you for taking the time to listen.